Albert Camus believed the death penalty was one of the clearest signs that a society had lost its moral center. He did not oppose it because he was sentimental about criminals, nor because he denied the suffering of victims. He opposed it because he believed that when a state claims the right to kill, it crosses a boundary from justice into something far more dangerous. To execute someone is to claim absolute authority over life and death. It is to say, we know not only what you did, but who you are and what you deserve forever. Camus believed no human institution could make such a claim honestly. Courts are run by people, and people are fallible. They make mistakes, interpret evidence imperfectly, and are shaped by political pressure, fear, and public anger. History is filled with wrongful convictions, false confessions, and biased judgments. To kill someone in this system is to pretend these imperfections do not exist. For Camus, this pretense was intolerable. Execution requires certainty, but certainty is precisely what human justice never has. He also rejected the idea that killing a criminal honors the victim. The death penalty promises closure, balance, and a sense that the moral scales have been restored. But Camus believed this was an illusion. A second death does not erase the first. It does not bring the victim back. It does not heal the grieving. It only creates another absence. Violence does not undo violence, it multiplies it. Camus believed the true purpose of justice is not to avenge, but to protect life. When the state kills, it stops being a guardian and becomes an executioner. It turns law into a ritual of death, carefully scheduled, bureaucratically organized, and performed with solemnity. That cold efficiency disturbed Camus more than crime itself. A murder is chaotic. An execution is calm. It makes killing respectable. A society that executes does not prove that it values life. It proves that it has decided some lives no longer count. And once that decision is accepted, no one's dignity is truly secure. Supporters of capital punishment often argue that the death penalty deters crime. Camus believed this was one of its most persistent and dangerous myths. Violent crimes, he observed, are rarely committed by people who are calmly calculating the consequences of their actions. They happen in moments of panic, rage, jealousy, despair, intoxication, or psychological breakdown. In such moments, the future barely exists. Fear of execution cannot restrain someone who is not thinking rationally. The death penalty, Camus argued, does not prevent murder. It only follows it. What execution actually satisfies is not safety but anger. Societies want to believe that killing the killer restores balance, that pain has been answered with pain, that justice has been achieved through symmetry. But this is an emotional response, not a moral one. It is a desire for revenge disguised as fairness. A grieving society wants to see suffering imposed on the person who caused suffering. But inflicting pain does not heal pain. It only spreads it. True justice should aim to reduce suffering, not multiply it. When the state kills, it creates a new tragedy. One family has already lost someone to a crime. Now another family loses someone to the law. Two circles of grief now exist instead of one. Nothing has been restored. Camus believed that if public safety were truly the goal, execution would be unnecessary. A dangerous criminal can be imprisoned for life. They can be removed from society without being destroyed. Killing them adds nothing except death. It does not make anyone safer than permanent incarceration already does. What it does is satisfy a darker human instinct, the desire to see someone punished absolutely. Execution offers a dramatic ending. It creates the illusion of finality. But moral problems are not solved by theatrical endings. A humane society must resist the temptation to turn punishment into spectacle. Justice must be firm, but it must also be restrained. When punishment becomes cruelty, it stops being justice at all. For Camus, the death penalty was not the ultimate form of justice. It was the ultimate failure of justice. A sign that society had lost the patience and humility required to deal with human wrongdoing in a truly ethical way. For Camus, the most horrifying aspect of the death penalty was not the execution itself, but the waiting that comes before it. A condemned person does not simply die. They are forced to live for months or years, knowing exactly how and when they will be killed. Every morning they wake up knowing that their life has already been officially ended, even though their body continues to breathe. Time becomes a kind of prison inside the prison. This waiting is not neutral. It is psychological torture. The condemned person exists in a suspended state between life and death. They cannot plan, hope, or imagine a future. Every sound in the hallway, every footstep, every opening door becomes a possible signal that the end has arrived. Their mind circles endlessly around their own extinction. Sleep becomes shallow. Thoughts become trapped. Identity begins to dissolve. Camus believed no crime, no matter how horrific, justifies this kind of suffering. To impose it deliberately is not justice. It is cruelty stretched over time. The law is not merely taking a life, it is slowly destroying the mind before taking the body. This suffering is largely invisible to the public. People think of execution as a single moment, a switch pulled, an injection administered, a life ended. They do not think of the years of dread that lead up to it. Capital punishment hides its brutality behind procedures, appeals, and formal language. But cruelty does not disappear just because it is organized. Camus saw this as a form of moral hypocrisy. Society tells itself that execution is clean, humane, and controlled. In reality, it is one of the most psychologically violent punishments ever devised. It turns every day into a countdown to death. A justice system that inflicts this kind of torment cannot call itself civilized. It has replaced moral restraint with institutionalized suffering. For Camus, this was proof that the death penalty does not serve human dignity. It systematically destroys it, not only in the moment of death, but in every moment that comes before. Camus believed the death penalty rests on a deeply flawed idea that a human being can be fully defined by their worst action. Execution freezes a person in a single moment of horror and declares that moment represents their entire existence. Everything they were before and everything they might become afterward is erased. The crime becomes the person. Camus rejected this completely. Human beings are not fixed objects. They are shaped by experiences, mistakes, regrets, and reflection. Even someone who has committed a terrible crime remains capable of change. They can feel remorse. They can come to understand the harm they caused. They can grow beyond the person they were in the moment of their crime. Execution denies this possibility entirely. It says, "You are finished. You are nothing more than what you did." For Camus, this was not justice. It was metaphysical arrogance. It assumes that the state has the right to decide who someone is forever. A society that believes in justice must also believe in the possibility of transformation. To deny that possibility is to deny the full reality of human life. When the state kills someone, it declares that it no longer considers that person human in a meaningful sense. They are no longer someone who can change, only something to be eliminated. This way of thinking is dangerous. Once society accepts that some people are beyond humanity, it becomes easier to expand that category. First it is murderers, then it is criminals, then it is enemies, then it is anyone who does not fit. Camus saw this pattern in the brutal politics of the 20th century. Totalitarian regimes always begin by deciding who is no longer fully human. The death penalty, in his view, belongs to the same moral logic. It creates a category of people who may be destroyed for the supposed good of others. Justice should protect humanity, not erase it. Punishment can restrain, isolate, and even severely limit a person's freedom, but it should never deny that they are still a human being. Camus believed that once the state claims the right to destroy a life, It has abandoned the very idea of justice it claims to defend. Camus also believed that the death penalty corrupts the moral atmosphere of an entire society. When killing is legalized, it changes how people think about violence. It teaches that under certain conditions, destroying a human being is acceptable. It teaches that dignity is conditional, that some lives may be taken without moral consequence. This lesson does not stay inside courtrooms or prisons, it spreads outward into culture. When the state kills, it sends a message that violence is a legitimate tool of order. That message influences how people see criminals, enemies, and even political opponents. Once killing becomes morally normalized in one context, it becomes easier to justify in others. Violence is never neatly contained, it always leaks. Camus believed this was one of the death penalty's greatest dangers. It trains people to tolerate cruelty. It makes death feel routine. It turns execution into a bureaucratic procedure rather than a moral crisis. A civilized society should feel horror at killing, not comfort. But capital punishment slowly erodes that horror. The language of law helps this happen. Executions are discussed in abstract terms. Sentences, procedures, methods. Real human suffering disappears behind technical vocabulary. The person who dies becomes a case file. Their fear becomes a statistic. Their final moments become paperwork. Camus believed this bureaucratic distance was not accidental. It allows society to kill without feeling like it is killing. But moral responsibility does not vanish because violence is organized. Killing remains killing, even when it is done politely. A society that executes people becomes morally numbed. It begins to see death as a tool rather than a tragedy. This is why Camus believed capital punishment does not protect a society's values. It slowly destroys them. If justice is meant to affirm the worth of human life, then a system that routinely takes life in cold blood is betraying its own purpose. Camus also rejected the idea that the death penalty delivers fairness or equality. Supporters often argue that execution gives the murderer the same fate they gave their victim. They see it as a kind of moral symmetry, a life for a life. Camus believed this was a dangerous illusion. Murder is a chaotic act. It is usually driven by passion, fear, or despair. Execution is something entirely different. It is planned, scheduled, documented, and carried out by officials in calm, controlled conditions. It is killing without emotion. That makes it morally worse, not better. The state does not kill in the heat of the moment. It kills in cold blood. Camus believed this bureaucratic killing strips away even the tragic honesty of crime. A murderer may act under overwhelming emotion, but an executioner acts with full awareness and time for reflection. There is no panic, no loss of control. There is only procedure. That is why Camus saw execution as a deeper moral failure than crime itself. He also saw that capital punishment is applied unevenly. The poor, the marginalized, and the powerless are far more likely to receive death sentences than the wealthy or socially protected. Race, class, education, and access to legal representation all influence who lives and who dies. This means the death penalty is not truly about justice. It is about who society decides to value. Camus believed a punishment that falls most heavily on the least powerful cannot be morally defended. If justice depends on money, influence, or social status, then it is not justice at all. A society that executes is not just killing criminals, it is killing the poor, the forgotten, and the voiceless at a higher rate. This alone, Camus believed, was enough to condemn the death penalty. Camus believed that one of the most devastating facts about the death penalty is that it cannot be undone. Every justice system makes mistakes. Innocent people are convicted. Evidence is flawed. Witnesses lie. Bias creeps into trials. When someone is imprisoned wrongly, that injustice can at least be corrected. When someone is executed wrongly, it becomes permanent. You cannot free the dead. Camus believed this single reality should have ended the death penalty forever. A system that accepts even the smallest risk of killing an innocent person has already crossed a moral line. It is not justice, it is organized chance. History is filled with examples of wrongful convictions later overturned by new evidence, confessions, or scientific advances. Many of these people were sentenced to death. Some were executed before the truth emerged. For Camus, each of these cases was an irreversible moral catastrophe. No legal system, no matter how careful, can guarantee perfection. To use an irreversible punishment in an imperfect system is not strength, it is recklessness. Camus also believed that the existence of the death penalty pressures courts to rush decisions. Appeals are limited, public anger demands quick resolution, political leaders want to appear tough on crime. All of this increases the chance of error. Execution does not make justice safer, it makes it more dangerous. A society that truly respects human life must design its punishments to allow correction. Justice should be able to say, "We were wrong." The death penalty makes that impossible. For Camus, this was not a technical problem. It was a moral one. A system that accepts the execution of even one innocent person in the name of order has already sacrificed its humanity. Camus also believed that the death penalty allows society to avoid facing its own responsibility for crime. When a person commits a terrible act, it is easy to see them as a monster who appeared out of nowhere. Execution makes this story comforting. We kill the criminal, and the problem seems to disappear with them. But Camus believed this was a lie. People do not emerge in a vacuum. They are shaped by poverty, abuse, neglect, trauma, social exclusion, war, and inequality. None of these excuse murder, but they do explain how human beings are pushed toward violence. When society executes a criminal, it pretends that these forces had nothing to do with what happened. We kill the person and keep the conditions that created them. This allows society to feel morally pure without changing anything. We can say, justice has been done, without asking why crime happens in the first place. Execution becomes a way to hide from responsibility rather than confront it. Camus believed that if a society truly wanted less violence, it would invest in education, mental health, economic security, and social support. Camus also believed that the death penalty allows society to escape responsibility for the conditions that produce crime. When a person commits a terrible act, it is tempting to see them as an isolated monster who emerged from nowhere. Execution reinforces this illusion. We kill the criminal, and it feels as though the problem has been removed along with them. But Camus believed this was a dangerous lie. People are shaped long before they commit crimes. Poverty, neglect, violence, humiliation, addiction, war, and social exclusion all leave marks. None of these excuse murder, but they do explain how a human being can be pushed toward it. When society executes a criminal, it pretends that none of these forces mattered. It turns a complex human story into a single evil moment. This makes the public feel morally clean without requiring any real change. We can say justice has been done while leaving the social conditions that produce the crime untouched. The system punishes individuals while ignoring the environment that formed them. Camus believed this was a form of moral laziness. It is easier to kill one person than to confront a society that creates desperation, rage, and hopelessness. Execution becomes a way to hide from collective responsibility. A justice system worthy of the name should ask harder questions. Why do some communities experience far more violence than others? Why are certain groups overrepresented on death row? Why do cycles of crime repeat across generations? Execution answers none of these. It only silences one voice. Camus also believed that when a society kills its criminals, it signals that it has given up on understanding them. It chooses destruction over insight. But understanding is the first step toward prevention. You cannot reduce violence without understanding what causes it. To kill is to end the possibility of learning. For Camus, this was one of the most tragic aspects of capital punishment. It does not solve the problem of violence, it simply buries it under a corpse. Camus believed the death penalty also survives because it is hidden. Executions take place behind prison walls, far from public view. The details are sanitized. The language is technical. The violence is concealed behind legal rituals and official statements. This distance makes it easier for society to accept what is being done in its name. If executions were public, Camus believed, support for the death penalty would collapse. To see a person restrained, watched, and deliberately killed would force people to confront the reality they have chosen. But by keeping it invisible, the state turns killing into something abstract. Camus argued that abstraction is what makes cruelty possible. When suffering is hidden, it becomes easy to ignore. The condemned person becomes a case number rather than a human being with fear, memories, and a body that wants to live. This invisibility is not accidental. Capital punishment requires it. If people were forced to witness the slow, controlled taking of a human life, many would no longer be able to call it justice. Camus believed that modern societies prefer to kill quietly. The brutality remains, but it is wrapped in procedures and professionalism. Executioners wear uniforms. Doctors monitor vital signs. Official language speaks of protocols and dosages. But behind this medicalized facade is the same ancient act. A human being is being killed by other human beings. The difference is that now it is done politely. For Camus, this polite cruelty was more disturbing than raw violence. It showed how easily moral horror can be replaced by bureaucratic calm. Killing becomes just another administrative task. A society that hides its executions is a society that knows deep down that what it is doing cannot survive daylight. Camus believed that the death penalty ultimately rests on revenge, even when it is dressed up in legal language. Society feels wounded by crime. A life has been taken, and the community wants that wound answered. Execution offers a target for that pain. It promises that suffering will be balanced by suffering, that outrage will be satisfied by blood. But Camus believed this instinct, however understandable, must never guide justice. Revenge is a natural human reaction, but it is not a moral principle. It does not restore what was lost. It does not heal grief. It only spreads pain outward. When the state executes, it transforms a private desire for vengeance into public policy. It makes anger official. Justice, Camus argued, must be stronger than anger. It must resist the emotions that follow trauma rather than be ruled by them. A society that allows itself to kill because it feels hurt has surrendered its moral authority. Camus believed that if law becomes a tool for emotional release, it stops being law. It becomes ritualized retaliation. The courtroom becomes a stage where grief demands a sacrifice. This is why Camus insisted that the death penalty does not elevate society above crime. It drags society down into the same moral logic. It answers killing with killing. It responds to violence with violence. It says, in effect, that death is the proper solution to human conflict. But if death is the solution, then humanity has nothing left to offer. Camus believed that a society worthy of the name must find a better answer to violence than more violence. It must be able to say, "We will not become what we condemn." That refusal is the foundation of moral order. Execution abandons that refusal. It declares that some people may be destroyed so others may feel satisfied. For Camus, that was not justice, it was surrender. Camus believed that in a world without divine law or cosmic justice, the value of human life becomes even more fragile and therefore even more sacred. There is no higher court beyond this one, no final judgment that will set things right after death. What happens here is all that happens. When the state kills, it does not send someone to another realm of justice. It simply ends their existence. For Camus, this made execution morally unbearable. In religious societies, the death penalty was often justified by appealing to God. A murderer might be punished on earth and judged again in the afterlife. But Camus lived in a secular world. He believed that once God is no longer the guarantor of meaning, human beings become the sole guardians of one another's dignity. There is no one else to take responsibility. This means every life becomes infinitely precious. There are no replacements. There are no second chances beyond death. When the state executes someone, it does not merely punish them. It annihilates a consciousness, a perspective on the world that will never exist again. Camus believed no institution has the moral right to erase a human being in this way. The death penalty, in his view, belongs to an older moral universe where absolute authority was taken for granted. Kings executed, empires destroyed, gods commanded. But modern societies, which claim to value equality and human rights, cannot honestly inherit that power. To kill in the name of the law is to pretend that the law stands above life itself. Camus believed a truly humane society must accept its own limits. It must acknowledge that it cannot fix every injustice, that it cannot undo every tragedy, and that it cannot make the world morally clean through blood. Execution is an attempt to achieve moral purity through death. Camus saw this as both arrogant and futile. Death does not purify, it only empties. For Camus, abolishing the death penalty was not a sentimental gesture. It was a profound moral choice. It meant choosing restraint over blood, dignity over vengeance, and humanity over fear. It meant acknowledging that even those who commit terrible crimes remain part of the human community. Camus did not believe this was easy. It is far easier to kill than to live with the tension of unresolved injustice. Execution offers a clean ending. It closes the story. But real justice is not about clean endings. It is about living with complexity without giving in to cruelty. A society that refuses to execute does not deny suffering. It simply refuses to answer suffering with more death. It says that even in the face of horror, there are lines that must not be crossed. Camus believed that once a society grants itself the right to kill, everything becomes conditional. Rights become privileges. Dignity becomes negotiable. Humanity becomes something that can be revoked. That is a world governed by fear, not justice. The refusal to kill, by contrast, is an act of moral courage. It is a form of rebellion against the brutality of existence. In a universe that offers no guarantees of meaning or fairness, the choice to preserve life becomes the deepest affirmation of human worth. Camus believed that the death penalty represents a surrender to despair. It says that people are beyond redemption, that violence must be answered with violence, that death is the final solution. But Camus refused to accept that view of humanity. Even in a broken world, he believed, the refusal to destroy is a way of saying that life still matters. And for Camus, that refusal was the very heart of justice.